Hey everybody, I'm Zach.
And I'm Jesse.
And you're watching In Depth.
On Now You Know.
Now before we get started, Jesse, I think it's important to let everyone know that you and I are Tesla shareholders. We are long on the stock, and that's how we're going to be kind of framing everything in this episode.
Right.
I want to talk about what's been going on with the FUD storm, but what's really going on behind the FUD storm.
We have this weekly show, which is crazy because this is this long thing. This getting to electric vehicles is this long path.
Right.
And every week there's a ton of news, which is insane. We started with Tesla Time News. It wasn't enough. We had to do In Depth. We had to add lightning rounds and stuff. There's a lot of news to cover every week. And that's crazy, because it's a very long goal. It's very far in the future. Floodsters really can take advantage of that.
True. Right, because every week, basically, it seems like we hear good news about Tesla, but then every week there's like a boom FUD storm story that comes in, and it's like
production hell, head cave diver tweets, crying over tired Elon, SEC lawsuit.
And so just as you're about to be like, oh yeah, they're producing the Model 3, it's like, boom!
Right.
Smack down.
Everything's bad. Everything that you thought was good is bad. And here's why. Sources, undisclosed sources, have told us this thing, or this thing is going to be the end of the world for Tesla, and then it never is.
And I thought, last week with the end of the SEC, the SEC settlement is done, we're moving on. But then again, look at this week. CNBC just came out with this headline.
Elon Musk's extreme micromanagement has wasted time and money at Tesla, insiders say.
Right.
And it's like, thank you, CNBC, for giving us just another fuddy article that we have to read.
Right.
And if you dive into it and read it, it's like, okay, all these employees can say this and that, but hasn't Elon done amazing things? When you step back and you look at what the company's actually done, you can pick on them, poke on them all you want.
Right.
They've done amazing things.
And there's a lot of stuff in the article that just doesn't go along with what they're trying to say.
Exactly. It's like the editors got the article and they're like, what kind of headline can we stick on this?
Right.
Quietly behind the scenes, with their heads down,
every day,
Tesla employees, engineers, even the robots are working hard on the EV revolution, and some amazing things have happened, and I think it's our job to point them out.
Right.
So I was reading the Seeking Alpha article.
Okay, wait. Why were you doing that?
I know.
Every story they post is FUD, isn't it? They're
Pretty
a bunch
much
of short sellers.
Pretty much. Yeah, it's a horrible website if you're long on Tesla, except that every now and then, our buddy Ross Tessian gets an article through. He submits a lot of articles to Seeking Alpha, by the way, and they throw out most of them because they are short on Tesla, and Ross likes to point out the good things about Tesla. So this is an article from our buddy Ross, and it's just really amazing. It has a lot of good points, and I thought we should point them out because they show you what's really going on behind the scenes.
Okay.
Number one, let's take a look at this graph. This is from Bloomberg NEF, and it shows that the time it takes to sell 1 million EVs is shortening. So we see here that it took 60 months from 2011 to 2016 to sell 1 million EVs. That's a long time.
That is a long time.
But then look at this.
Now it's just up to 6 months.
It just took 6 months to sell 1 million EVs, and it did that twice. This is an exponential curve.
Right. It's we can't see the end of it. It's going to go practically vertical at some point.
Yeah, we've been talking about the S curve for a long time. This is the beginning of the S.
And this is where we can actually start to see that curve, because for a long time you can sort of look at that growth and be like, that's linear.
Right.
It's gonna take 1 billion years to sell enough EVs to make a difference. And again, S curves, they're so cool. They look like this. We're approaching that really exciting part of the S curve, that part of the curve that just goes up, and then it can level off once basically everyone has an EV.
Exactly. So, point 2, Ross proposes that for every new EV sold, there are 4 new ICE cars that will not be sold.
Well, I mean, that's not true.
It seems like it's not on its face, but let's look at his argument.
Okay.
So he argues that for every EV you sell, that's 1 ICE car you're not going to sell. So that makes sense, 1 to 1.
Right. I think that's where most people would be like, I am following you.
Right, 1 to 1.
Yeah.
But he points in the next thing. When you go to buy that EV, say the Model 3, you're probably going to trade in what you drove to get there. So you trade in that car, and the dealer now somebody has to sell that car. And so that ICE car is not a new ICE car. That is a used ICE car.
Used ICE car. Right. Okay.
So that's number 2. So that's the
because so
second.
then someone else is going to buy that car
Instead of
a new one.
And then the third is the show-off effect. So you buy your new Model 3, you drive it home, you show it to your buddies, your people, your friends at work, your family, and then 2 or 3 people or more go, wait, what? What is that, Dave? That's cool. I want one of those for my next car. I didn't even know anything about them. And we have seen this effect because it's not that everyone's heard of Tesla. Very few have. And those that have just heard the FUD storm. So they've heard like there's a crazy guy that runs the company.
Right.
They didn't get in the car and drive it and go, whoa.
Right. I've had in the past week and a half, have had so many of my friends, actual friends, people that I know, contact me and are like, tell me more about this Model 3. Because it's right about now where everyone's starting to actually see it, hear about it. And yeah, as soon as someone goes for a ride in it, they're practically sold.
You know what this feels like to me? Most of you can remember this. It wasn't that long ago. Was the switch to smartphones. Mm-hmm. We went from flip phones, and then one day you saw your friend who had this cool screen thing, and you're like, well, I don't know about that.
Right.
But then you started using it.
You
and
the Bic lighter app or the Zippo lighter app, and you're like, whoa, that's super cool. And the lightsaber app, and you're like, wow.
And the first thing you probably said to that person was, I would never get
Yeah,
those.
I don't need that.
I don't need that. I like my flip phone.
Right.
But then a few months later, you're like, and you go and you get one.
true.
That's what I feel like is happening now.
Honestly, I think that this is different. This is more gotta have it kind of feeling. Because I mean, a phone,
I don't
especially
know.
back then when we were just thinking of making calls and stuff, But everyone has cars, and everyone is sick and tired of
True.
oil changes and exhaust replacements. And
I'm just saying it happened quickly.
true.
When people made that switch, it happened quickly. People who said they'd never switch, a month later, like, hey, Sally, why do you have a smartphone? You said you'd never get one. And so to Ross's point, we are now selling 2 million EVs per year. That means that 8 million ICE cars are being removed from the market each year, and that number is growing.
So you're saying 8 million new ICE cars?
No one wants them.
I see.
And number 3, this is a quote from Ross's article. Legacy automakers today are like a wolf caught by the leg in a trap. To survive, they'll need to chew off their own leg. In other words, they'll need to throw away their industry advantage in the form of hundreds of billions in assets devoted to building ICE engines that, going forward, are worthless. That's the world for a big auto right now, is they've got factories that make the wrong kind of car. And instead of shifting quickly to try and fix that problem, they're just trying to buy themselves time. Point number 4, the Model 3 is selling nearly 5 times more cars than the nearest luxury competition, and none of those competitors are EVs. This is a clear signal that car buyers prefer EVs over ICE cars. So take a look at this chart here, and it makes it very clear that the Model 3 is blowing away its competition. Mm-hmm. Now, if you don't believe me, let's just take a look at this next chart here, which is Tesla cars versus Porsche and Jaguar in worldwide sales in Q3. So try and wrap your head around this. That's all of Porsche's cars. That's all of Jaguar's cars sold. And Tesla's beating these 2 luxury car brands that have been around for decades. So Model 3 is now the 4th best-selling passenger car sold in the U.S., and Ross expects it to surpass the Toyota Camry to be number 1 by the end of this year.
Wow.
Remember, we've been saying we think it'll be the number 1 selling car, including like the Ford F-150 by next July.
Right.
But to beat the Camry by the end of this year,
it would be huge.
That would be huge.
Right.
All right, so point number 5 is that in May of 2018, the AAA survey found that 20% of their customers expected their next car to be an EV. This means that there are between 25 and 50 million people in the U.S. delaying their new car purchase until the right EV for them becomes available. So from the 2017 survey to the 2018 survey, there's about 5% more Americans, or 5 million more Americans, that were added to that EV future buying list.
Wow.
That again matches his estimates that 8 million people per year are now switching to EVs as their next new car choice. Now, when AAA repeats this survey next May, Ross expects they'll find 30% of Americans are waiting for the right EV. This will put another approximate 10 million Americans out of the new ICE vehicle market space. That so many Americans are on the sidelines for their next new car purchase explains all of these red cells in the table above.
And that's showing legacy automakers losing sales in a drastic fashion.
Mm-hmm. So point number 6, if Ross is right and the EV market will become the next big auto, who will own the EV market. So let's check out this graph showing January through September of this year.
What kind of graph is it? Some kind of a city graph? Is this like Abu Dhabi or New York City or something? Like, what are all these buildings?
It's really cool. So Ross made this 3D graph. What we're seeing from front to back is January through September.
Okay.
So time. So the first 3 columns there are the Model 3, the Model S, and the Model X. And then the rest of the columns are other EV models from other EV manufacturers.
Okay, so like the Bolt and the Leaf and stuff like that. Okay.
So if you look at it that way, you begin to see a pattern. What do you see?
There's this huge field that's completely flat. Like they're not selling anything.
Right. Compared to Tesla, you're seeing that Tesla is basically owning the entire market.
Right. I mean, you can see the Bolt and you can see the Leaf, but other than those two and Tesla, there's nothing. There's just a bunch of names.
So I mean, a lot of people might be saying, "But Zach and Jesse, the Chevy Bolt. I mean, that beat the Model 3 to the market for a $35,000 EV. I mean,
Right.
How is it doing?" Well, let's look at this chart from Galileo from Hyperchange, which is a YouTube channel we love. So this chart is showing the Bolt sales in blue and the Model 3 sales in red. And again, what do you see?
Well, at the beginning, the Bolt looked like an impressive lead on the market.
Yep,
but
the Model 3 wasn't out yet.
right, but then you can just see the Model 3 just went whoop, and the Bolt went and it just kind of steadily at the bottom.
Yeah, Bolt is now being outsold more than 14 to 1.
Wow.
That kind of shows you who owns the market. But if you're not sold on my argument here, Ross has a fantastic graph here. So let's look at it another way. This graph shows that if you sum all of Tesla's U.S. sales and you divide it by a sum of all the other EV brands' U.S. sales, you get this graph. And what you see is that starting in January, the ratio of Tesla sales to other EV sales was about 1.5 to 1. So
Still a demanding lead.
demanding lead, that means that for every EV sold, not a Tesla, you sold 1.5 Teslas.
Wow.
But let's look at September. Now we see an 8.5 to 1 ratio. So that means that for every EV sold, about 8 plus are Teslas. So for every non-Tesla EV sold, the Chevy Bolt, the Nissan Leaf, you get 8.5 Teslas sold.
Wow.
Or if you want to look at it in very simple terms, about 9 out of every 10 BEVs that are sold are Teslas. So let's go on to his next graph here. Now we're going to look at cumulative sales. So this chart here from Bloomberg, it shows the cumulative global passenger EV sales. So we're including all other countries here. We're looking at millions of cars sold on the left. That's our scale. And the first thing I think you want to point out here is that the aqua color, the teal color, that is the US sales. And almost that entire color band is Teslas.
Tesla. Right. Yeah.
Because, as we said, they sell 9 out of 10 cars. The next big thing you notice here is that China in red is a huge factor here. Now, that little dotted line there, that's where we are today. Everything to the right of it is what's predicted to happen. If we look at the area under the curve there in red.
So that's China's sales in the future.
Right.
That's enormous. It's is equal to everything that's ever been made up until this point.
Exactly. And that's only for the next year or so. So we're seeing an explosion. This is, again, the S curve, the explosion in EV sales.
Right.
And what's exciting is that Tesla is going to be a part of that red curve soon as they build out their Shanghai factory.
Right.
All right. So the Tesla killers, that's the next one you hear from Shorts. It's fine. Tesla's doing well, but here come the Tesla killers. They're going to take over the market.
Right.
Let's take a look again at an analyst that we quote a lot, Tony Sacconaggi, and he recently put it this way in his note to his shareholders. But let's make this clear. There is no actual flood of competition coming. We tallied up every announced electric vehicle arriving in the U.S. between now and 2022, and the results were stark.
Right. And we've seen this. We've seen this before. Car manufacturers come out with a cool, slick-looking concept, and everyone's like, wow, that's cool. I didn't know you could have the car body do this or that, or, wow, it only seats one person, huh? And then they finally go, oh, we're actually going to make this car much lamer looking, and it's going to come out in 2020, and we don't have a factory to produce the batteries, and we don't have a factory to produce the cars yet.
And we don't have a supercharging network.
We don't have any kind of charging. And you're like, okay, so wait, how many cars are you going to be selling? And they go, well, we're going to be selling some cars. We're not getting real stuff from these auto manufacturers. They're just putting out a lot of fluff of like, oh, we're going to make a Tesla killer. It's going to kill Tesla. And it's like, unless you hit all of these key factors of charging, a car that everyone wants with the right range, there's no way.
Yeah, Elon basically hit the nail on the head. He knew that by coming up with the luxury cars first, he would take over that market, create a luxury brand. So look at this chart here from Bloomberg, and this shows Tesla's sales over the past few years. And as you can see, it's just chugging along, nice solid S and X sales. Those are the light blue.
Right, because they've
S&X sales.
basically taken over the luxury market.
Right.
A huge chunk of luxury cars are Teslas.
And a lot of people said, well, why are you coming out with these expensive cars, Elon? No one can afford them. Well, some people can afford them, and you don't have to produce as many. That was smart. He didn't have to come up with a mega factory. He could make a smallish number of cars and make enough money to afford the next launch. Now, as we see here in black, that's the Model 3. And as you can see, quarter after quarter, tremendous growth.
Right. And it's going to explode onto the market until it too has to finally level off because basically it's taken over the market. And other car manufacturers really can't follow behind, by like starting off with the really expensive cars because there's already this market. When Tesla was busting into the luxury EV market, there were no luxury EVs.
Right.
And
created a new market.
A completely new market, one that was wildly popular and that people really, really liked.
Now, Ross brings up another good point here with quarter 3 profits. Everyone's talking about will they be profitable in quarter 3 or not. Look at this chart of Tesla's quarterly income from 2009. Now, what you can see is there's a short blip of profitability after the Model S ramp up. See that little, just a little bit of profitability.
Yep.
And then we see another one at the end of the Model X ramp up. Now we're here spending money on the Model 3. Here's the key, amazing, truly amazing point. The time in between new car launches for Tesla to become profitable is shrinking. Look how long it took them from their first Model S ramp up to become profitable. Then Model X, shorter amount of time.
It's true.
And now if they pull it off, if they're profitable in Q3, which we think they will be, look how short that got.
Right.
That means that every new model they come up with, the time it takes for them to ramp up and get profitable is shorter. Most companies would just make their first product and then once it was profitable, just keep pushing out that one product, stop the innovation, and just make money off that product.
Right.
And that's what the part that Wall Street doesn't get. But here's the thing. As Ross pointed out, Elon has stated that he will hold off on spending for 2 full quarters this time to make it clear to everyone that Tesla can be profitable. And so let's imagine that they are profitable in Q3 by a little bit. And Elon holds off on spending to do any major ramp-ups for another quarter so that they're way more profitable in Q4.
Right.
That will send a strong signal to everyone saying, hey, if we wanted to just keep doing this, we could.
Right. But we are going to continue on this path of making cars, making money. And if you want to hop on board, go right ahead. Right. We're going all the way to the top.
This is the Amazon model. Let's think about it. I mean, Amazon spent money hand over fist building factories, building automation, computers, and they now dominate the market. And that leads to enormous future profits.
Right.
Because they rolled all of their money, their revenue they were making every quarter, back into building their business.
Right.
That's what Tesla is doing here. It makes complete sense, but it's a different business mindset from most companies from the past.
Right. It's taking over the market. Once you've taken over the market, that's when you can profit.
Right.
It's sort of like building the railroad. You build the railroad first, and then you make a profit. When you're in the middle of building the railroad, when you're halfway across the United States, and
Nothing's
people
happening.
are like, well, you just built a railroad to nowhere. And it's like, well, we're halfway to the other coast, and all of a sudden you're going to be able to put stuff on the train that goes across the thing.
Exactly.
Same thing here, except they're going to just have dominated the market like they've dominated the luxury market. They're going to dominate the passenger car
That's
market.
a really good point, because if you go back and study history, everyone says now that it was such a smart idea to build a railroad.
Right.
But at the time, if you look at newspapers, people were saying, what's the point of this?
Right.
Like, this makes no sense. No one lives there.
Right.
Why would you build a railroad to nowhere?
Right. Forward thinking.
It took forward thinking
Yeah.
to see that was worth it, and it took a lot of money, a lot of capital.
Right.
So Ross estimates that $6.7 billion in revenue will be earned for quarter 3, which would be a $2.8 billion increase over quarter 2.
Wow.
Think about that. Now, spending in quarter 2 was $700 million. Ross is hoping for net profit of $300 million for quarter 3. We're going to have to see if his estimates are right. If that's even close to being right, I think that no matter what the fudsters try and come up with, it's really hard to argue success,
Yeah.
especially car after car after car. This is the 4th model that Tesla will have produced that worked.
And the Model 3, as you've heard on the news on Monday, is getting cheaper. It's the cheapest Tesla you could ever buy. It's just going to get cheaper and cheaper. until finally a lot of people can afford it. Maybe not everybody, but a lot of people can afford it. And what you're getting is this grassroots kind of thing where you can't just yank Tesla up out of the ground because it's freaking in there. People everywhere have heard of it, have seen it, have experienced it. And as soon as everyone has experienced it, there's no going back.
No, I think you're getting to the end of the line on that. I think that car companies, oil companies, they're finally realizing, like, we got to shift our strategy because this is not working.
Right.
And thank you to Ross for writing such an amazing article that really laid out all the arguments.
Really in depth, and so in depth that it got through Seeking Alpha's short list. They're like, no, it's a bunch of facts. I guess we have to, gotta print it because otherwise
print the facts
it would be a
sometimes.
little suspect if we didn't. Yeah, go give Ross a friendly comment on Seeking Alpha if you want. And if you want, you can like this video. It helps get this video out to other people. So when you're, hopefully it might go out to, George at the water cooler. He might, one day be scrolling through YouTube and see this video, and he might click on it and watch it and be like, oh, wow, that was a bunch of points that I didn't hear on CNBC. Right. So if you want to, go right ahead.
That's how it works.
Share it with a stranger. That's kind of the like button's utility. Doesn't make any sense. YouTube doesn't quite understand how humans work, but anyway, that's how it works. So thanks so much for watching. Now you know.